We're good. Hello and good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone here and anyone watching on Granite Town Media and via the internet to the 2020 Milford School District Deliberative Session. My name is Pete Basselier. I'm your school district moderator, and I'm calling the meeting to order. As we begin, I'd like you to please rise, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and remain standing afterwards. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you remain standing, please, I'd like to invite Reverend Shana Appel, the pastor of All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, who has been called to the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Milford, to give an invocation.
Good evening. I've been invited here this evening to offer an invocation, which we usually think of as the summoning of a deity or the supernatural, for some people God, to come into a place and to help us with something that might be just a bit bigger than what we feel up to managing on our own. But if we expand the definition of invocation just a little bit, we might also think of it as an action of calling on, right, or invoking something or someone's assistance or as an authority. Mindful that those of us gathered here tonight come from many different religious and a-religious backgrounds, I'm going to do something just a little non-traditional tonight and invoke all of us. But not just the us as we show up on most days in a variety of places, too fragmented to think deeply, compassionately, humbly. Tonight I want to invoke the deeper us, the fullness of us, the complete us. I want to invoke the us we show up as when we're deeply connected to our values and our virtues. I want to invoke the us that shows up swaddled in integrity, buoyed by our passions, held in check by ethics and morality and decency, ever mindful of the inherent connection we bear to each other and to all. I want to invoke us and our humanity into this place tonight and remind us that we are here for a common endeavor, the care and education of our children. We may have different notions about where we're going. We may have different ideas about how to get there, but at the end of the day, we're all neighbors. We're all citizens of this community we call home. And while divisiveness, disrespect, and disingenuousness has become the very substance of what we are compelled to swim in and day out, it is not who we are. It is not who we were created to be. So tonight I invoke all of you, my sibling citizens of Milford, and I pray we can find a common way forward in these difficult times. Between us, I think we're up for the challenge. Peace be with you, and amen.
Very good. Thank you, Reverend. I appreciate it. So the school district meeting in Milford is a two-step process. The first is tonight's deliberative session, and then second is the election on Tuesday, March 10th, when we will vote on the language of the warrant articles that we decide tonight. The election will be held at the middle school between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m., and will include town and school district warrant articles, and we will also be electing our town and school district officials. If you have not already done so, all registered voters should check in at the tables to your left. You'll receive a sticker to indicate that you're a registered voter and a note card to use when we vote on the different articles. As a reminder, I would ask everyone to please either mute or turn off your mobile phone unless you're a member of the emergency services. Also, for anyone watching on Granite Town Media, you can visit the school district's website at www.milfordk12.org, where you can find a copy of the warrant that we'll be discussing tonight. As an aside, the school board is in recess from an earlier meeting. This is a common practice. The select board does it as well. The board will reconvene that meeting immediately following the deliberative session, and I imagine that their intent is to vote on the take final votes on the warrant articles. The Budget Advisory Committee also plans to meet after the session to cast its votes, the final votes on its positions. With that, I'd like to turn to School Board Chairman Ron Carvel to introduce the members of the board and other important people.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First off, I am Ron Carvel, the board chair. To my left is Kevin Drew, the vice chair. Mike Hannon, board member. Holly Talapa, board member. Rick Wood, board member. Dr. Jessica Heisinger, our superintendent of schools. Jane Forston, our business administrator. And Chrissy Michaud, our assistant superintendent of schools. Also, I'd like to introduce the admin team that is here tonight. We have Chaley Davis, our high school principal. Tony DeMarco from the middle school principal. And I do believe I've seen Chris Saunders here somewhere. He's in the back. Our assistant principal at Heron Pond, and Tim O'Connell, our principal at the Jacques School, and director of special services, Mike Hatfield, who's also with us today. And Bill Cooper from the director of building and grounds. In back of us is the school attorney, Megan Glenn, and our school clerk, Gina Matthews.
Very good. Thank you for that. And now, Mr. Wynn, the chairman of the Budget Advisory Committee.
I'm John Wynn, chairman of the Budget Advisory Committee. To my right is Dave Wilson.
Speak into it a little more, if you would.
To my right is Dave Wilson. It's already on. Okay. And to his right is Karen Silvesco. And to her right is Susan Smith. And to bring up, last but not least, Andrew Stover.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. And as assistant moderators tonight, I have Todd Leo, Karen Mitchell, and Rick Leiden. With that, I'd like to turn to some recognition, but I also want to mention right out of the gate that We the People is here with lots of goodies. You saw them coming through the audience a few minutes ago, like at the ball game, and please don't hesitate to avail yourselves of those items. Mr. Carvel.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First off, I want to recognize one of our principals that's been with our school system as the Milford Middle School principal for 20 years. Mr. DeMarco has been in education, I believe, now for 28 years, 36 years and 28 years as an administrator. This is a huge loss to our school system. Tony has been here. I've known Tony for years. And he has been here really fighting for students, fighting for kids, every chance he gets in every capacity. And I know he's looking forward to spending many more times at the Patriots games and living his world down there. So Tony, I'd like you to come on up. I have something for you. And I don't know if you want to have a speech. I know you don't like this kind of stuff, but certainly we want to thank you for all your hard work here and give you this plaque as well. And we are truly going to miss you as an administrator here. Thank you.
I heard something about a brew pub in your future there, Tony. I don't know. Now we're ready to begin. At tonight's deliberative session, you're empowered to do two things. First, you can discuss each of the three warrant articles. And then second, you can take one or two courses of action on the article. You can maintain the wording, in which case the language goes onto the ballot just as you read it, and there's no vote required for that. Your other choice is to amend the original wording of the warrant article, and if the amendment is approved, that language is what goes on to the warrant, the ballot for the March 10th election. As in the past, I've provided you with my moderator's rules of procedure. They're on the inside cover and the first page of your handout. If you haven't received one of these, I think there's probably some more left. But the most important rule is actually the very last one, and that is that any of the moderator's rules of procedure may be overturned by a simple majority vote. So if you have any questions about the rules, I'm happy to entertain them now or again later. Does anyone have a question about any of the moderator's rules for the conduct of this meeting? All right. I'll take it as a resounding yes, but again, if you have a question later on, don't hesitate to ask. Mr. Carvel, I understand you have several non-residents that you would like to have speak today.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mr. Moderator, I move that we allow the following non-resident registered voters to be heard at these proceedings tonight. Dr. Jessica Heisinger, Christy Michaud, Laura Siebert, Bill Cooper, Chaley Davis, Tony DeMarco, Chris Saunders, Mike Hatfield, and Attorney Megan Glenn.
And that is seconded by Mr. Drew. These are non-residents who presumably have expertise you might want to engage later in the evening, so if we say right now that it's okay for them to speak later, we don't have to go through a vote. All those in favor of this list of non-residents, enabling them to speak when called upon, please raise your card. Thank you. Anyone opposed? All right, the ayes have it for sure.
So, Mr. Moderator, there's
Yes.
been a signal that we want to add our IT person as well,
okay.
as he is here. So I'd like to make a motion that we allow a non-resident registered voter, Jerry Stagger, for our IT department to also speak at this meeting.
Very good. Is that seconded? Second. Yes. Mr. Drew again, thank you. All those in favor of allowing this to happen? Anyone opposed? All right, we're good. Thank you very much. Okay. So we'll be working from the packet that you have. The packet has the text of the articles as they will appear on the ballot unless you amend them today. What I'm going to do is introduce the topic, the dollar amount, and some of the text of each of the warrant articles. It's as much for you as it is for the folks watching at home now or perhaps later via Granite Town Media or the internet. I will then ask the school board to speak about the article, followed by the Budget Advisory Committee, and then we will open it up to questions and comments, and if you wish, amendments from the rest of the body. So with that, let's move on to Article 1, and that is, shall the Milford School District vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amounts set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $43,322,305. Should this article be defeated, the operating budget shall be $42,911,974, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required action of the Milford School District or by law. With that, I'll open up the conversation to Mr. Carvel.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, we will have Dr. Jessica Heisinger go over the program itself that's impacting the budget.
All right, good evening, everyone. Dr. Jessica Heisinger, I'm pleased to present to you the 2020-21 proposed Milford School District budget of $43,322,305. It's a 1.0% increase over this past year, or $453,947. This percent increase also includes the sunset of the bonds of $607,721, which you'll see in your packet. And that is the retirement of the Heron Pond bond, as well as the reduction of interest rates around the track and the $3 million bond that was passed by the Milford community. Some budget considerations that went into the formulation of this budget, improving the program quality of the Milford School District. We understand that the education of your children is a significant investment of the community to all of us. And you deserve the best return on that investment, whether or not you have children in the schools, because our educational system has a great impact on the quality of the overall community. And so we feel a great debt to you and thank you for all of the support that you have provided us in providing the best education that we can for your children. The other consideration, besides the idea of continuous improvement and aligning our resources to the strategic plan, is to implement opportunities and increase access and innovation across the school district from PK through 12, while also looking for cost-effective and cost containment opportunities. Some of those that you'll see in the coming years is cost savings around LED lighting, the sunset of bonds, and looking for different efficiencies across the budget. And we've looked at areas where we can reallocate and really divert resources to the areas of greatest needs and in alignment to our strategic plan. So we've been looking very closely at the budget in that way. Other considerations is, as I said, taking advantage of the sunset of those bonds that you see in your packet of $607,721 and reinvesting them into the infrastructure, which we have done in this budget, and looking at energy savings. And then cost increases associated with our employee contracts and non-affiliated employee salaries. That is the majority of the increase that you see in our budget are simply obligatory costs in wages. And you'll notice in your budget packet that the obligatory costs and wages and benefits are the most significant impact to the budget increase this year, and it's around $758,358. So that's the most significant increase. There's more due to additions that we're looking to add to improve innovation and access and programming, but we also, again, looked for efficiencies and looked for areas where we could divert resources and reallocate resources in order to continuously improve our programs. Another budget driver besides the obligatory costs of contractual obligations, wages and benefits, is our enrollment data, looking at the influx of enrollment, the declines of enrollment at different levels in different areas of the system, and really putting our resources in the places where we had the greatest need. Another factor is revenues. Jane Fortson is going to come up and talk a little bit about revenues that we'll be seeing over the next year, one-time revenues that we see from the state, and actually what that final number actually lands at due to a variety of formulas and factors, cost savings and expenditures. Another factor that we looked at in the development of this budget is facilities and maintenance costs, and then out-of-districts costs. And we see a little bit of an uptick in our budget this year for out-of-district special education. And finally, and probably most important, is our strategic plan, our 4 key goal areas of student success, school culture, policy and communication, and community engagement. Really looking at that 5-year plan and saying, are we diverting resources in order to continuously move our system in order to meet our goals and our objectives and different key aspects of program improvement. So you'll see in your packet, just a couple of pages in, that the overall increase of salaries and benefits are about $838,358 overall. And that is the combination of non-affiliated staff, possible raises, of $54,371, added to the obligatory cost that I mentioned of $758,358. So those two added together equal your $838,358 overall increase in salaries and benefits. There are also new and expanded positions, which I'm going to go over a little later in the presentation. And those new and expanded positions equal about $368,000. However, we did make some position reductions and reclassifications, reducing the budget by about $402,722. So you can see we really were mindful about when we added new positions, we added them with the intent to continuously move us closer towards meeting the goals and objectives of our strategic plan, and you'll see where those are. But also to keep in mind that we cannot continue to just add and add and add to the budget, because not everyone in the community can afford us to just continue to add to the budget. We needed to be mindful of all of the taxpayers of Milford and make sure that we were being as efficient as possible. Other salaries and benefits, these are contractual obligations, so all contracts, administrator contracts, teacher contracts, paraprofessional contracts, custodial contracts, these were obligatory of around $749,245. And so that equaled the entire proposed budget, those increases of $43,322,305. Again, a 1.0%, 0.06% increase, or about $453,947. And again, I just want to reiterate that the sunset of the Heron Pond bond and some of the reductions in interest savings offset that $607,721. Okay? So I want to talk a little bit about the strategy and some of the decisions we made when we talked about position reductions and reclassifications, as well as the position additions. There were specific reasons why the administrative team and myself put those forward to the board. Our strategy really is sixfold, and really at the heart of it all is really to strengthen teaching and learning, really strengthening our core curriculum and instruction to really get the best outcomes that we can for all kids. And so that's number one, and that really drove every decision that we made. The second thing is really how do we go about increasing time and supports for students, teachers, and families. Last year we did a significant reclassification and reallocation of staffing and created a lot of new positions, a lot of support positions such as social workers in the schools in order to provide more wraparound services and make connections with outside agencies so that families could have more outside supports. And we've been able to do that this year due to the great support of the Milford community. And so I thank you for that, and many of our families thank you for that. Investing in really high-quality professional development has been a key strategy of ours across the board in the last couple of years. And we're continually working on making it better and better because we know that the number one factor in improving student learning outcomes is a high-quality teacher in the classroom, and the second most important factor is high-quality leaders. And third is really high-quality curriculum materials in the hands of high-quality teachers are going to get great outcomes for kids. The other thing we wanted to do is provide more access to students to higher level courses, more access and opportunity for students to get credits at earlier grades, more pathways, and we're working diligently each and every day to increase those opportunities and increase innovation at every level. And I think over the course of the next couple years, we're going to see some really exciting things coming out of our schools in regards to innovation. We really wanted to focus on the fundamentals, build a strong foundation at the elementary level so that students were really coming up through the middle and the high school, really able to take advantage of personalized pathways, innovative pathways, career and technical pathways in ways that they haven't been able to before. And so that strong foundation at the elementary level really building for a strong and multiple opportunities at the middle and high school level. And last but not least, just expanding opportunities for choice and voice and innovation across the district, increasing access to technology, which you'll see some asks in the budget this year to increase access to technology, the arts, music, and foreign language, which we were able to bring back down to the middle school after many years being gone last year. So we're really excited about many of the things that are happening across the school system, and I just want to commend the hard work of our teachers and our administrators and our support staff. They've just been doing really incredible work, and I'm really proud each and every day of how hard they're working and the outcomes that we're seeing already for students. Some highlights for the FY21 proposed budget at Jacques Memorial School. We're busting at the seams at that building, and really excited. People are moving to Milford. People want to come to the Milford School District, and we saw a significant uptick in students at Jacques Memorial this past year. I think about 65 new students, and in order to create more space at Jacques Memorial, we're looking to move the preschool program over to Heron Pond next year. Which will allow for more space for the teachers and for classrooms. Right now we have art and music sharing a classroom, and that makes things really difficult. So we're going to address some spacing issues by moving to Heron Pond, our preschool program. And we'll also be expanding our preschool program, and I'm really excited to share a little bit about that with you. Also addressing early wellness and health by increasing our physical education health teacher at Jacques Memorial. Over the last couple of years, we've increased the number of specialists at Jacques Memorial, which has brought a lot of value added, I believe, to that building and to our early education programming. And through your support, our full-day kindergarten program is thriving, and more people are coming to Milford to take part in it. We're going to look to continue to strengthen our early literacy practices, again, in alignment with our our strategy of building a strong elementary foundation and continuing to strengthen our core curriculum and improve our curriculum and instruction at the early grades, and looking to provide some specialized professional development around early science exemplar standards for teachers. One of the things that is very, very clear in our data is we need to pay more attention to the sciences. And in this day and age, the sciences and technology fields are booming, and there aren't enough skilled workers to take those jobs. And so our opportunity here in Milford is to build a strong foundation of science and technical skills of our students and send them off into the world to do whatever it is that they want to do and dream to do. And also, finally, developing a multi-tiered system of support, both for academics and behavior, and we're working diligently on that as well. So a lot of really good things happening at Jacques Memorial Elementary School, a lot of really great hard work, and I'm really proud of what the teachers and staff and students have already begun to do. And I want to thank Tim O'Connell for his really hard work this year. He's done a great job. Heron Pond Elementary School. I'm really excited that we're going to be bringing music programming back during the school day. I think that is going to be wonderful. Last year, I asked the music department to put together a study of the music programming K-12, and we've seen a significant decline in the number of students who are accessing especially music education at the high school. And there's a variety of reasons for that, but one recommendation that they had was providing access and opportunity to music programming during the school day at the elementary level, because what we saw in the data was a significant decline at the time where we stopped having music programming during the school day. And so we made a significant push this year to get music programming back into the elementary school next year, and we'll be having that for grade 5, and then providing access to after-school programmings for grade 3 and 4. So we're really excited about that first step to expand music programming. Also looking to expand the health and wellness program at Heron Pond by increasing to two full-time physical education health teachers at Heron Pond. Right now, I think we have 1.5 or 1.5 teachers, and we're looking to expand that to 2 full-time teachers. And if anything that I've heard from students in speaking with them is that they have felt that health education really needed to be introduced even earlier in their experience with all of the different things that are going on in their lives now and all of the different things that they have access to, both good and bad. They felt that having that earlier access to education, many of them have shared with me, would be good. And so I'm really excited to be able to see that all the way down to the early grades, kindergarten, so that we can really develop as a community a comprehensive health and wellness program that is really going to set our students off when they graduate to be really successful, especially in health, wellness, and social and emotional learning. We're going to look to continue to improve and expand our literacy program to grades 4 and 5 next year, and also continue to expand our inclusionary practices for students with special education. At Milford Middle School, just this year, we added back foreign language to the grade 6, and we're really excited to hopefully see growing numbers at the high school in students who are accessing foreign language. And we're going to look to continue to strengthen that program at the middle school. This year, students will be able to take the final exam at the high school for credit in foreign language and algebra. And so we're hoping to also provide students early high school opportunities and early high school credit for those who can access it. And they should be allowed access and the ability to do those things at the middle level. Expanding our new math program to grades 7 and 8. This year we've been piloting the #1 rated math curriculum in the nation by Ed Reports, and from all accounts I've heard it's been very successful, and we're looking to expand that to grades 7 and 8. And we're also looking to expand inclusionary practices into grade 6 and continue our work around universal design for learning in grades 7 and 8. So a lot of really wonderful things going on at the middle school. This year's responsive advisory has been a significant success. And again, I just want to commend the, middle school teachers for their work around advisory, Mr. DeMarco for bringing advisory. Just a lot of really wonderful work happening across the district. Our literacy program, the teachers are working incredibly hard. Our grade 4 and 5 teachers are working incredibly hard around co-teaching and inclusion. So I'm really excited to see in a good 12 to 15 months some of the results of that. And at Milford High School in this budget, we're looking to update some furniture to really provide some 21st century learning and hands-on opportunities for students. Last year when I was able to go around and talk with all of the departments at the end of the year and ask them what were some of the needs that they had and desires, the ability to flexibly move furniture. A 90-minute block is a long period of time to have students and desks, and many of them mentioned having some innovative, flexible furniture to be able to design different types of collaborative opportunities and work for students was something that they desired. And so we were really excited to be able to put that into the budget this year. We're also looking to expand technology at the high school to increase students' access to Chromebooks and software to really promote an orderly school day and continue to help support our operations, and some really exciting updates to the ATC Center. For many years, we've had kind of a slim budget around the ATC Center. This year, we've really expanded that. Vasso's smiling, and it makes me happy. We're looking to buy a new lathe for the precision machining program, which is just taking off with our new externship partnership with Spray Systems and Hitchner. It's been a really fabulous program this year. So upgrading that lathe is going to be a really important part of that program. Providing industry certifications for students is going to be another really significant upgrade to the programming, as well as looking to upgrade some of the equipment for the culinary department. That's also another wonderful addition that we'll see in the ATC Center, and I'm sure much, much more with our resourceful new ATC director. So really excited about some of the new things coming to Milford High School. In special education, we're looking to increase the preschool teacher by 0.5. We have a waiting list for our preschool program. They've done a wonderful job of really trying to integrate typical peers along with students with special needs, and there's a long waiting list for our program, and this will really allow us to become a true integrated early childhood learning center. And so there's a really wonderful opportunity here to expand that programming. Looking to continue to expand inclusion and high-quality special education programming, which we've done quite a bit of new things this year, and also to improve technology, assistive technology, to help students with special needs access the curriculum. And last but not least, in the area of teaching and learning, in curriculum instruction and professional learning, really trying to secure a strong social and emotional learning curriculum, K-12, and really kind of build those soft skills that are so critical and so important for students: executive functioning skills, metacognition, self-direction, self-management, self-awareness, the ability to social skills, to work with others. Those are all very, very important skills that students need direct and explicit instruction. And many of us learned that through play, right? When we were young, and we had just many of us grew up in a different day and age that our students now are growing up in. And the direct, explicit instruction in these areas are going to be really beneficial to helping us graduate all of our students with the competencies in our portrait of a graduate. Also, expanding literacy training and instructional resources for staff and teachers, and implementing the next generation science standards and training around that. In building and grounds, we're looking to make scheduled repairs to Milford High School's track, to do the first phase of the replacement of the Heron Pond Elementary School roof. Sorry, I have the flu. I hope it's not as painful for you as it is for me. Technology, again, we're looking to replace Chromebooks and enhance the district registration process. This is going to be so wonderful. The district registration process, we're going to move away from paper. Parents will be able to do it online. We'll be able to update information very quickly and rapidly. We're really excited about this component to really make it easier for families to register, as well as our staff to not have to spend so many hours having to input paper and pencil registration forms. So this is going to be a significant improvement for us. District-wide, we're looking to increase co-curricular funding by $5,000, increase our legal lines. We have an increase in our district-wide dental insurance of about 3.9% and an increase in district health of about 0.3%. So just a couple of staffing changes. I mentioned earlier that we had some reductions and some increases in staffing. You'll see that at JMS, as I said, that's in alignment with our strategic plan goals 2, school culture, developing a comprehensive health and wellness program. It also aligns with strategic plan goal 1, student success, increasing health and wellness both at Jocks Memorial and at Heron Pond. Increasing an additional elementary teacher at Jocks Elementary due to the uptick that we've seen in the early grades. I think part of it has to do with the awesome quality of the Milford School District, of course, but also our wonderful full-day kindergarten program. So we're looking to add an elementary teacher to Jocks Memorial to maintain our smaller class sizes at the lower grades. Again, in alignment with our strategy of building a strong foundation at the elementary level, and adding an instructional assistant for more support at Jocks Memorial, as they've seen that uptick of about 65 students this year. An additional music teacher, which I mentioned at Heron Pond, an additional preschool teacher part-time at Heron Pond, and a district-wide school nurse. This year, we've seen just a significant need for additional health care. We've got more medically fragile students, particularly in the preschool and early grades, and having an additional school nurse is going to help relieve some of the challenges and areas where our current nurses have felt very stretched this year. And also be someone who can fill in on a regular basis, particularly when we've been unable to find a nursing sub, which has happened quite a few times this year. And last but not least, we've had to, again, make some reductions. As you'll see here on the slide, on the lower end of it, we're reducing our library associates from full-time to part-time, maintaining all of them, but reducing them by 1 hour per day. Our speech language associate is a reduction, and we're going to be reducing 2 instructional assistants from full-time to part-time at the middle school. Due to a reduction in numbers at the high school, we're, according to enrollment projections, looking at about 73, down 73. I don't believe that we're going to see it at 73. That seems a bit high to me, but just due to the reduction in numbers and enrollment at the high school, we're reducing 1 mathematics teacher, 1 culinary teacher, 1 family and consumer science teacher. The culinary and family and consumer science are both early retirements via attrition. Library associate, as I mentioned earlier, full-time to part-time, and then district-wide 2 program associates, and those have already been reduced from full-time to part-time just simply through attrition. So that's really no change there. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jane Fortson, who's going to discuss the revenues, and most of you should have gotten a revenue sheet on your way in. We were passing them out, and she's going to briefly explain those to you. Thank you.
I'm going to first ask you to bear with me because Jessica gave me the flu, and so it's in my throat, unfortunately. So as we talk about the revenues, I kind of want to go off screen for a minute. We did give a handout, and the reason I want to go to the handout is because when you just look at the revenues up here, it doesn't really tell you a whole lot. It's year over year, it gives you the history, it gives you what's been reported for the current year and what's projected for next year. But there's been a lot of talk about the state and one-time funding, which is actually two-time funding. So what I wanted to do is just break it down in the simplest way that I can, because that's how I understand things, and I tried to do it in a picture. So what I've done is, in the handout that we have, you'll see the fiscal year 18-19 actual revenue numbers, and you're going to see fiscal year 19-20. Those are the numbers that I have reported up to the Department of Revenue as the projected numbers for this year. As you look at those numbers, and you go down the fourth column that says change from 18-19 to 19-20, I'm going to hit the larger numbers. You're going to see a change of $468,989. I know it says negative, it's really not. It's just the way revenues work. As a credit, comes as a negative. That's really an increase, and that's the first part of the added state funding that we're getting. It's a reallocation of, I think we only had 2 years of kindergarten funding at $1,100 per student. The state has now funded it at the full adequacy amount of, I think it's like $3,500. Still not very high. But they have reallocated that, and they have added to, I believe, special ed and free and reduced costs. So we have an increase of $468,989 that we'll have to offset expenses for the current year. You'll see a decrease, even though it's a positive, of $150,700. That is the kindergarten funding that's no longer being termed as kindergarten funding. It's being included in that adequacy number of $468,000 above that. And then you're going to see a $55,985. It's actually an increase, and that's increased funding in our CAT aid, or they call it special ed revenue now. And then down below, you're going to see a change of $281,605. That's the decrease that is coming as a matter of an emergency rule that went into effect that has hit all the districts across the state, and that we are going to see drastically reduced Medicaid revenues. So I have estimated $50,000. I know that right now there are bills in place. The governor has been speaking about changes, so it's kind of a wait and see. That number may go up, hoping it does. But for now, when I estimated in September, I had to go with the most conservative that I could. So you're going to see that gives us a change, net change of a positive $109,686. And so as you go to the second page, any questions before I go? And I'm sorry if I'm going too slow. I just am trying to help people understand, because I know it's been a question.
Jane, I'll have questions after the board.
Okay, thank you. The next one is the actual fiscal year 19-20 budget number that went to the state. So that's our current year number that I've estimated, and that's compared to the fiscal year 2021 estimate that I'm putting forth for next year. So there's really only one major change in that, and you're going to see the $1,510,651. That is the second part of the $2 million two-time monies that we'll be receiving from the state. So as you go down, you'll see the total increase that I'm projecting for the 2021 year to offset your expenditures is $1,507,538. Again, these are all estimates. That is going to be offset by a $774,962 number. That number is the amount of excess fund balance, or surplus, as people know it better, that we had last year that was applied against taxes. So that $1.5 million gets offset, because if you have no surplus this year, you're automatically going to have a drop of that $774,000 surplus. Okay? So it brings the difference to about $732,576. So that one-time money is not really $1.5 million. It's already reduced by the fact that if we don't have any surplus this year, it would automatically be reduced. I'm going to have you ignore the parts below because at the time, I had the number that was the superintendent and administrative budget presentation of 700 and something thousand. So I had that number offsetting that remaining amount, and it showed about a $3,000 money left over. When you offset the lack of surplus and the expenditures, it would have been about a $3,000 decrease in your taxes. So as you go to the next page, this is just, I put this in place, and I've used the A, B, C, D, E, F, so that you can see the numbers that are projected for the MS-24 or the statement that I report up to the Department of Revenue. You can see how those numbers come to be, and then I've actually included the MS-24R, which is what the Department of Revenue receives from us, and I've tied those numbers over so that you can see how those numbers are carried through. Okay. Currently, for the 1920 year, we are seeing a tax rate of $19.12. That's the actual rate that was paid for the, or charged for the school piece of the tax bill that you received. And based on, and this is only estimates because a lot of things can change. I understand there's another reassessment going on of the businesses, so again, that's going to change your assessed values, which will change this number. But I'm projecting a 20-cent increase with the proposals that are in here that include the proposed warrant for the operating budget, your proposed warrant for the expendable trust for special ed, and the proposed warrant for facilities maintenance expendable trust. It would be a 20-cent increase to your taxes. Again, definitely an estimate because I have to use the current numbers that I have. Assessed values are going to go up. That will actually make your increase go down, okay, for next year. This is basically showing you the operating budget, that if you take the revenues that you saw earlier and you offset it from the proposed budget and the warrant articles, you'll see it comes down to the bottom line of the 20-cent increase. Default budget is currently $43,616 above the last year's operating budget. Default budget is your prior year expenditures minus one-time expenses, and you add or take away your contractual costs. If you make any deductions in employees, that also reduces your default. That's a new law that went in last year. You can offset if you're, in our case, I can tell you, we're adding a nurse and we're reducing a math teacher. Those can be offset in a default, so they appear that way. That's a 0.1% increase over the current year's operating budget. And this, again, is just showing the current year on the left side and the proposed default on the right-hand side, coming down to a net change of, I think it's, I don't have it in front of me, and I can't see it, 6 cents, and it's a reduction in your taxes.
We're not quite to warrant Article 2 yet. We'll get to that in about 8.5 hours. Okay, all kidding aside. So are you all set?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the presentation by the school board and the administration on the budget. I'd like now to offer Mr. John Wynn and to give the Budget Advisory Committee's opinion on the budget.
We had a vote just prior to this meeting, and we came up 5 in favor and 2 opposed to this budget. I'd like to just read a statement from the minority, if I may.
Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you. Okay. A minority of the Budget Advisory Committee did not support the board's proposed budget, as we felt that in our review of the budget, there were reductions that could be made without impacting direct services to students. Our recommended reduction of $215,000 in a $43 million budget is less than 0.5%. This could easily be managed through reductions in non-direct student services and savings from staff turnover through attrition. We also believe that this amount can be justified as the proposed budget saw a reduction in debt service of approximately $620,000, due principally to the final payment of this year's Heron Pond bond. The board is proposing to use $400,000 of this decrease to reinvest in the infrastructure with the Facilities Expenditure Trust Fund. We believe that the taxpayers deserve to share in the benefit of the payoff of the Heron Pond School. Our recommended $215,000 reduction returns to the taxpayer, the savings no longer needed for debt service. Dave Wilson would like to read the majority opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. The majority of the committee supports the school board's proposed operating budget for several important reasons. First, it includes investments in curriculum, professional development for teachers and staff, and urgent facility repairs that have been underfunded for many years and are necessary to improve student outcomes. In addition, it supports the priorities outlined in the new strategic plan that was developed last year by a committee of community members, teachers, students, and administrators. Finally, it is a reduction of $275,000 from the original budget proposal and is only 0.95% higher than the default budget. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So at this point, we can open up the floor to any questions or comments, observations you may have. Yes, Mr. Carvel, yes.
Board's vote.
I'm
Just
sorry.
the board's vote.
Oh, yes, okay.
So, thank you, Mr. Moderator. The board supports warrant article number 1 in a vote of 5-0.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, so now we can open up the floor to any questions, comments, observations, potentially amendments that you would like to make. Yes. When you come to the mic, please state your name and your address as well.
Good evening. I am Erin Moran of 124 Cortlandt Road. Tonight I have prepared a statement that will end as a motion. While I appreciate the I wrote this down, so I'm going to just read it to you guys. While I appreciate the conservative 1.06 increase over the last year's budget that is being proposed, I feel that this figure is not sufficient to adequately address all the needs that are facing our students, primarily our playgrounds, that align directly with the school district's vision and mission statement and their strategic plan, which states, the Milford School District nurtures all learners to be designers of their own stories by supporting well-maintained facilities and infrastructure to enable and support student achievement, fiscal efficiency, and cost-effective delivery of programs and services. As many of you are aware, the elementary and middle school PTOs are working together to raise funds to replace the playgrounds at Jocks and Heron Pond and to resurface the outdoor basketball court and add outdoor furniture to the middle school. While we are diligently working to raise funds, this is an immediate concern and fundraising takes time. Primex, the district's insurance company, assessed the integrity of our school playgrounds and they failed the test. They are old, outdated, cannot be repaired, and they are not considered safe by the insurance company. I feel that we cannot wait for the PTO to raise all of the funds needed to complete these projects. I would like the PTOs to work together with the SAU. For example, ground surface safety materials that will best meet ADA standards for accessibility cost $15 a square foot, totaling as much as the play structure itself. The PTO has done its research, and there are some fabulous play structures that will meet the wellness goals in the district's strategic plan, as well as address social and emotional learning through sensory play. We can raise funds and add pieces to the playground over time, but we need to start with the ground surface. That being said, I would like to make a motion to increase the proposed budget by $60,000 with the intention of addressing playground needs such as grounds at Jocks and Heron Pond.
Okay, so you're,
I'm making a motion, yes.
yes, all right, that's great, thank you very much. So I think what you'd like to increase it in.
Increase it by 60,000, yes.
50.
No, 60,
60,
60,
see? That's why I
60,
asked.
sorry, thank you.
And so that would make the new total $43,382,305.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Is there a second for that motion? There's a second. Can I have a name, please? I didn't. Jane Garvey, thank you. I need that for the record, thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else wishes to speak to that amendment? Mr. Daniels, another gentleman right behind you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Steve Vitak. I live at 5 Georgetown Drive. And although I do favor helping support this playground, I think it's important for everyone here to know that the school board, time and time again, anytime the budget has been increased for something that most people want, will remind us that they can spend the money any way they want, and that's exactly what they will do. So you will put $60,000 into an increase in this budget, and they will probably not use it for what you intended for, because that's been the tradition of this board for as long as I can remember. So even though I support what you're asking for, the board is unlikely to do it. Thank you.
I don't need to say much. That was my comment, just for clarification, that that you can't really earmark. You can verbally say that this is where you'd like the money to go, but ultimately it is the school board who decides where the money is spent.
Yeah. Both gentlemen are correct in that regard. All right, is there any, yes, go right ahead.
Carla Boudreau, 9 Windsor Drive. Do any of the board members want to comment on the motion as to what their thoughts would be if the $60,000 did go into the budget?
I can comment. I can tell you, I appreciate that motion. I know that this was a very hard thing, at least from my perspective, to cut the playground, since I did view those playgrounds this past summer with tape around them and closing them, and felt that we needed immediate action. That was very tough to do. We were hoping fund balance this year would be maybe looked at to be able to do that. I know I attended with some other board members the fundraiser that the PTO did, which was great to participate in. I believe they did raise, I believe, around $22,000 for those things, which was excellent. It was a great event. But I can tell you, I did have painstaking to cut that amount from those playgrounds. But we had to choose, and I was hoping, at least in my eyes, that we would see some fund balance and be able to repair those into a much better position. That's my opinion. So, I don't know if any other board members?
Yeah. Just state your name for everyone, because I can't all see you from up back.
Mike Hannon, board member. If this gets voted, and approved, we'll make sure that this does happen, because I know it's very important for the kids. My kids play in the playgrounds. We want to see a safe, environment for the kids. They're not getting hurt. This is something that's been worked on with the PTO for a long time. This is something I know personally I would support.
Yes.
Holly Talapa, school board member.
Is that, yeah. Maybe speak into it a
Hello?
little closer. Yeah,
I'm not
thank you.
sure, is this on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I would also support that funding toward the playground. I would support that funding, and there's one other area. I think that ultimately, as we saw last year, I think it was $30,000 that was added, and there wasn't a lot of ability to spearhead it where it wanted to be spent. But
Mr. Lapa, could you just bring the mic a little closer to you, or, hey, maybe we got caught, all right.
Yes, I would support that, Ms. Boudreau. And there's one other area that I would support if indeed the additional funds were added to the budget.
And I don't know if I'm allowed to ask if Dr. Huizinga is also on board with the
You're fair to ask?
$60,000.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was one of the hardest cuts that we had to make when we had to go back, when the board asked us to cut $279,000. That was probably one of the hardest cuts to make, because we know how important and how needed those play structures are, and the opportunity for students to be out and about and playing. It is a core part of our strategic plan, so I agree with all of the board members. It is a priority for all of us.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Steve Tackett, Wooden Road. I wanted to follow up with those of us that did hear what you said about that we had earmarked some $30,000 last year, and it did not get spent on what it was supposed to, and you got cut off because the people couldn't hear you. So would you like to expound on that, please? I'd like to hear why it didn't get put where it's supposed to be, and what's to keep this from happening again.
Well, I wasn't on the board when that amount of money was requested. I was at the meeting when it was requested. I think that, as was already stated by two members of the audience, we don't have the ability to state where money will go. All we can do is pledge that we would support. So you have 2 votes, it sounds like 3 votes of people that would support that.
Mr. Tackett, I can answer that question.
Okay.
I remember very vividly that conversation last year. It was $50,000 that was added to the budget. It was added to the budget specifically for the purpose to add back paraprofessional support to the schools. And at the time, the budget, we had cut back significantly on the budget, and I was also asked by a community member what were my top priorities for things that were needed. And at the time, I had anticipated that we were going to need more elementary teachers because we were going to see an uptick in the population. And in fact, we added 3 elementary teachers in the spring and throughout the summer because we saw such a significant increase in students. And so that $50,000 actually went towards an additional elementary teacher. It wasn't that we wanted to just outright reject what the community wanted, but I also couldn't justify class sizes of 27 in an elementary classroom or 23 in a first grade classroom. We really felt that the priority and need was for an additional elementary teacher, and that's where the money went.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
But I come back to my other statement. You guys as a board, and Dr. Jess, I can't pronounce your name.
It's okay.
Please don't take offense. Mine's as bad as yours. You decided that this is not a priority. I don't know if anybody here belongs to the general public, but our tax bills all went up last year significantly. And I know this is only a 1.06% increase, but you're talking about 1% increase on $43 million, so it's quite an increase. The town just got done with 43 warrant articles Saturday, 37 of them which had money involved in it. So last year, all warrant articles passed on both the town side and the school side, and that's what's raising our, there's got to be a stop to it someplace. You guys have decided this is a place that could be cut without significantly hurting the education of the students. I applaud you for that, and I recommend turning down this issue.
All right, thank you. Yes, Mr. Cavell.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. One of the things the board is still looking at in this year is there is our contingency money that is here. There's also a possibility of fund balance. So those numbers are very tight this year with things that are going on through the course of the rest of the year. And I know this board had at its hearings and at its discussions, those playgrounds are in our views, along with some other things that we have reduced to try to not per se cut this year off and freeze budgets, because that's never a good thing in a school system. But certainly as we go through the year, we're going to take care of some of these things that we did have to trim down and not raise. So it is not something that we're not looking at as a board. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments on the amendment? I think Mr. Wood. Oh, Mr. Wood, sorry, I didn't see you there.
Thank you. I just want to be clear on 2 things. First of all, it wasn't that this wasn't a priority. It's that this is in balance with many other things that are also priorities. And so, we're talking about playgrounds in kind of a vacuum. There may be many other things out here that people have an interest in, so I'm just curious about that. One of the things I do want to mention, and I attended the gala as well, and it was fantastic, the total dollar value for both playgrounds that was proposed was $60,000. If $22,000 has been raised, the question really is, do we still need $60,000? And as Mr. Carvel said, there's been discussion at the board level on many occasions about, maybe we could take this from fund balance. It is an infrastructure item. It's one of those things that we need to kind of look at. I am curious, if I could ask just Mr. Cooper a question. There was a comment made about the insurance carrier evaluating these and saying they were unsafe, and I haven't heard that before, so I'm just curious if you could answer that question.
Yeah, I haven't heard that either. Primex hasn't looked at our playgrounds in 4 or 5 years, because we can do the self-assessment on them on a yearly basis. The problem that we found with the playgrounds themselves are, the one at Heron Pond is 17 years old. They have retooled for new playgrounds, and they do not make those parts anymore. When we had to replace the ones at Jocks, there were 7 platforms we had to replace because the welds had broke. And it took us 6 weeks just to get those in because they were having a hard time finding them. That's what actually is pushing this forward, to replace the playgrounds, because we're not going to be able to get any parts for them, I believe, after this year. And they looked all over the United States for the parts.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, Mr. Lapa.
I also wanted to say that the board has had discussions as well about reaching out, sort of forming a committee and reaching out to local businesses to help sort of fund the new playgrounds. I know that oftentimes you can put a banner up and you're sort of giving free advertising to the companies. So if there are any company owners in this building this evening, I would strongly recommend that you reach out to the PTO, to Ms. Moran or the school board, if that's something that you might be able to contemplate pushing forward. And I would be happy to help on a committee of that type as well, and we have had discussions about that. And I think that Mr. Wood was correct in stating that we were under the assumption that the PTO would be raising a portion of the funds, so it's not like we blindly in a vacuum said, we're going to cut this. We felt confident that this would be addressed through other avenues, and again, I think that future fundraisers are definitely going to be worth considering, and we do commend the PTO for all of your efforts thus far.
All right, very good. Any other questions or comments on the amendment? Okay. Oh, yes, take it. Yeah, sure, take your time. Don't trip.
Hi, I'm Tara DeVoli, parent.
Just slow
sorry,
down.
Tara
Say it
De-
again so the clerk gets
Hi.
your name. Thank you. She's on the far right, so.
Okay. Hi, Tara DeVoli, 85 Nunes Quarry Road. I'm a parent. Am I right in assuming that the playground at Jocks in particular is not handicapped accessible? I have a student that requires mobility issues and handicapped accessibility. To my understanding, it is not handicapped accessible, and is that in guidance with our commitment to every student being able to access all of the equipment in the schools and federal guidelines on American with Disabilities?
Now, tell me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cooper. I do not believe when that playground was put in, it was accessible. And one of the repairs and things that were being done wasn't that we couldn't modify it, that they were looking for the parts just to get it back to its normal. So I would tell you that was built probably without those codes. But again, I can tell you that the repairs, if we could have changed it, we probably would have. But when we get to that, it will be modified correctly to the standards.
Okay, I just wanted to point that out to everybody, that as we're cutting this part of the budget, that, my child has been relegated in probably 2.5 months with accessibility issues to playing inside. and/or potentially the blacktop only, not with peers, not with friends at times. Although they're doing their very best, I absolutely appreciate that. Just wanted to point that out, that it's not handicapped accessible.
Thank you. All right, then, I think we're ready for a vote. Oh, not quite yet, go right, no, come on up. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Erin Moran again, 124 Cortlandt Road. I don't have anything in writing this time. I just want to end by saying that I don't feel like this is something that should have to wait until the funds can be raised by businesses which are extremely generous, and the board which has been extremely generous, and the town which has been extremely generous. I feel like if we could allocate a little bit more into our budget to get these playgrounds started. We don't need to build the entire infrastructure right away. We need a little bit of extra money to break ground, to get these started. And we will continue our fundraising for as long as it takes. We already have new ideas. We've already talked about many new ideas and new things that we're going to do to continue to make these playgrounds, in Mr. O'Connor's world, destination playgrounds. We have so many fabulous ideas, and we don't want to wait for our handicapped children to be able to get to these playgrounds. We don't want these children to watch their peers go and play when they can't get there. It seems like such a small amount of money for making so many children happy. When my children come home from school at the end of the day and I ask them what their favorite part of the day was, they tell me recess. That hands down, recess. So I please ask that you consider my motion, and thank you all for your time very much.
Right. Thank you. Yes, you may, Mr. Wood.
Ms. Moran?
Ms. Warren? Moran, sorry. Yeah, that's all right.
Hey there.
Mr. Wood has a question. I think he'd like
Yes.
you to.
Just so I'm clear, the playground that we're talking about that's not accessible, that we're being talked about is at Jocks?
At Jocks, and if we could have our way, that would be where we would start.
So I guess my question is it the playground equipment itself or the route to the playground that is not accessible?
I was wondering if Mr. O'Connor could come up and help me with that, just please, thank you.
So you have a ramp that goes down there, and there's, the pathway goes all the way down, it's paved, but then we have rubber mulch there, so it's really difficult for if anybody in a wheelchair or with mobility issues to get around on the playground. And since I've been here in 2003, that's the way it's been. And when we started looking at these, when we were having problems with the parts, my thought would be to get a hard surface, the rubberized surface, and start there. And and I agree, starting at Jocks first would make the most sense.
If I may, one other question.
Yeah, go right ahead, Mr. Wood.
Thank you. So just so I'm clear, the PTO has raised to date about $22,000, correct?
Over $22,500.
Great job, by the
Thank
way. Great event. The playground is about $30,000 per playground. Is that accurate? Is that what we're thinking?
No, the playground structures themselves could be about that, but that does not include the turf. That does not include the bottom, the surface.
Okay, thank you. I'll just say to you that, as we've talked about this, the goal is really to find some money to not wait till all funds are raised. So I just want to say that to you, but, I'm going to actually support your motion.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wilson, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. From the many months of being on the Budget Advisory Committee, both not just this year but also last year, I find that there's very many lines that have probability in what can be spent. Things like general supplies. Almost every department has a line. Now, I don't promote trying to put more funds on a ballot that could possibly make it falter, and we go back to the default, which is not good because it's going to be less money. But I would definitely say, if I had the opportunity to look at the books throughout the next year and see what we're spending for any fund balance, these are the two #1 areas that are used every day by the most number of kids in our district that play. And this is something that supports the district's goals to having places where kids can interact and be kids. And they also used on the weekend. Before that big November storm hit, I personally went down with my kids, who are 19 and 15, and went to the Jocks and Heron Pond playgrounds. They definitely are in need of repair, remediation, or replacement. This is something I feel that we should involve at least within the budget numbers that we're currently dealing with now. I don't think that we need to actually add more dollars to our budget, again, to potentially make it falter at the voting on March 10th. I would strongly urge the current board and the current school administration to please make this happen. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, we have a motion to increase the operating budget by $60,000 to $43,382,305. All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by raising your card. Thank you. All those who are opposed? It's spread out all around. I'm going to ask for Mr. Leo and Mr. Lyden to come over and count the House, just to be on the safe side. If, Todd, from here over, including the Budget Committee, please, and if you will include the board and to the right, to the left. All those in favor, please signify by raising your card. All those opposed, please raise your card. Thank you. Okay. Oh, okay, cool. Okay, so the result of the count is those in favor, 69, and the opposed are 80, so the motion fails. We're back at the original amount of the operating budget. Anyone have any questions, comments about the operating budget?
Karen Mitchell, Clark Road. I have a couple of questions, and I'm not really sure if it's more suited to the Budget Committee or the school board, but you guys will let me know. I appreciate the past two budget cycles trying to be creative and really keep the increases reasonable and thoughtful. However, I'm first curious what other cost efficiencies you have found or have looked at while you've been building the budget.
Well, we start with the board, I think.
Yes, absolutely. So I can tell you, I can turn that over to our superintendent and our business administrator of some of the items that we have found through the various reviews of departments and the budget itself. So who would like to start with that? There is a long list of efficiencies that have been put together in our audits, and some of those items are through the business administrator and Jane's long, hard nights here till midnight, sifting through some of those line items.
I'm not going to go into detail on all of them, but just some of the top level ones. FMLA was not being handled in accordance with the law, and it was being granted to every employee, whether they qualified or not. We have stopped that practice. We are now in accordance with the state law, which is a little more rigid than the federal law at this point. We were granting part-time professional staff sick days, and that's not in accordance with their contract, so that practice has stopped. We have been a practice of carrying forward more days, not sick days, but vacation days than are allowed by the contracts. So that practice has been stopped, and we are adhering to the contracts as to how many days are allowed to be carried forward. It then reduces the amount paid out upon retirement or upon someone leaving because they're carrying a fairly large balance forward. Bear with me here. We're not auditing our health and dental bills very closely. So on a monthly basis, I review all the health and dental bills to make sure that the employees that we're being billed for are actually receiving our dental and health bills and not having been missed and just carried on for a period of time. Trying to think. There's some things, but they're not budgetary as far as we've not been reporting. Our account codes are not in alignment with the state chart of accounts. I am slowly trying to make changes to get those in line with the state chart of accounts. We have been making payments for health care, that if one employee carries the health care for a family and has a spouse in the spouse was also being paid out as cash in lieu. So they were getting coverage and being paid out at the same time. I apologize here. It's not so much efficiencies, but we, in the warrant articles that were being proposed specifically for the administrator contract, the potential for 2 employees within that contract to retire in a single year, those weren't being accounted for, so that in a year when there were 2 employees that retired, those funds weren't available. So we had to take funds from other places to meet that obligation because those weren't presented fairly on the warrant article. Student activity accounts. We've had no policy surrounding student activity accounts, and as of this fiscal year, those student activity accounts will be reported up with the district's financial accounts. So we've been taking a hard, long look at those, and we have found that payments were being made to students that weren't going through payroll for work performed. So we are trying to close some of those items down.
So I hope that answers some of your questions. There's been a lot of, those are all funds that, we have put a stop to what I've called the bleeding. That's been happening over the course of many, many years, and we've been doing a very, very close hard dive to make sure that all of that is stopped. And all of that money is now being directed towards students.
Thank you. As a taxpayer, that list horrifies me. I can't even fathom how long this has been going on, but thank you. It leads me to my other question I had. I've been looking over last year's budget compared to this year's proposed budget. There is a lot going on, and it is a lot to review, and I don't profess to understand the budget as well as all of you who have been doing this for some time, and the school board as well. But there is a line item on a page that in this year's proposed budget that really jumped out at me as compared to last year's budget. There is an employee who's receiving a $20,000 raise in salary. So my question would be, why is this common? Is there something that took place that we need to give that type of a merit increase, if that's what it was? Can anybody answer that for me?
So I think what you're seeing is similar to what Ms. Fortson had just mentioned earlier about cash in lieu, where there's two spouses who work in the district. They may be under different contracts, and one is carrying the family on their insurance, and the other is receiving cash in lieu or an annuity benefit that is in the entirety of the health insurance under their contract. And so when that came to our attention, the way that the contract was worded, we had a different interpretation of how that was to be executed, and to mediate it because of the way that practice had been done in the past. We came to agreement that because the agreement had been made in a prior administration for a lower salary, and in lieu of that lower salary, the employee would receive a annuity payment yearly. So in order to mediate that agreement that had happened years ago, I don't know when, the agreement was made to increase the employee's salary.
So you had to make someone whole, I understand that, in something that took place before this administration. Do we have any others of those out there?
We have mediated all of them.
Are you able to give me a dollar amount? Because this is also concerning to me.
Probably, I think in total it's about 28 or 29,000.
Can you restate that?
I'm sorry.
It's not your fault, it's the flu.
The 28 plus the 3? 29? It's around $29,000 per year.
For how many years?
Well, the 26, 27,000 probably.
It's now included in a wage instead of an insurance.
Right, but how many years did it go on?
Many.
Since 10? 9 years?
Okay. It seems to me that these are a whole list of what I consider significant items that add up. These are items that could help our school district be so much better than it is with all the things that we need, such as a playground, such as, additional teachers. It sounds to me like it was not under this school board. Do we know when it was? Can we get someone to answer some questions who was on that school board? It seems prudent to me to have some of these questions answered. It's my taxpayer money. It's everybody's taxpayer money in this room. Is there a plan to question anyone?
I don't know that the board was necessarily aware of a lot of these items. It's upon kind of going through these things that they've kind of come up. And it may be, I interpret something different than someone else has, but I try to read it with the lens of, if I'm the taxpayer, how would I read it? But I don't think the board was aware of a lot of these till we brought it to their attention.
No, this is not this current board. I understand that. I guess I'm saying.
I don't know if the past boards were either.
No, but who's ultimately responsible when these decisions are made?
I would say as the senior member on this board, I've been on the board for 9 years, and I can tell you that it was not something I was aware of.
No, but ultimately, when there's a school board, who's ultimately responsible when these decisions are made?
Well, I think the board has the ultimate responsibility, but it was not a negotiation I was aware of.
So there's no minutes on this decision that was made? I have no words for that.
So when we were doing all these audits for department heads and different efficiencies of managing the contracts and evaluating the budget line items to line up to I guess, balance instead of just throwing a large number in there and listing out all those. We found some of these things that weren't part of contracts. And in that search, and it's not just this board, it was the board prior that some of this, or just a year ago that when we started this process, that the board found that these things were established. In reviewing authority for those, you would always go back to the minutes or the vote or the actions of the board, and we could not find where that was documented as putting in place by minutes, by vote, by an executive board that would implement taxpayer money. So that's what we did, and what happened is exactly, it's nothing at the employee, so I don't want to label any of the employees this happened to.
I agree.
Because that's their benefit, and it was decided at some point, somehow. Unfortunately, the task of the board, last board, and all boards are to manage contracts to what the taxpayer voted. And those were realigned back for visibility, and that's why you see it in the budget to make that change. We made that whole so that the taxpayers would actually see the money going to those employees, because that's what the board should be doing.
Certainly, and I'm not putting any fault on the employees, but I guess as a taxpayer, I would implore you all to maybe do a little more research and find out how this happened so it cannot happen again, because it is not fair to anyone in this town, especially not to our students.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you.
I will say that, the one way that we're really trying to not make these things happen again is just to be really transparent with the numbers. As you see in the 287-page budget book, all of the wages are listed out there. Another thing that we found is just with the systems and the rollovers of employees over time, we found that there was employees listed that no longer worked in the district. And so we were able to actually find some funds last year when we needed to add those additional elementary teachers because of class sizes. We were able to do that because there was padding in the budget. And there was money in the budget that really no one was aware of. And so the more detail that we've been able to go into with the last two budget cycles have been very, very helpful in knowing exactly where the money is going. And that's allowed us to be as efficient as possible, and why we've been able to put forward two budget cycles at a lower rate. So we're working very, very hard to clean up those lines.
All right, thank you. Yes, a couple folks coming up.
Hi, Judy Dunbar, 46 Great Brook Road. I have what might be an easier question. The reduction of the hours, full-time to part-time for the library assistants at the high school, what impact does that have on the hours that it is open and available to the students?
I'll have to defer to each building principal to answer that, as those libraries operate at different hours.
This is specifically the high school, I believe,
To
right?
the high school, so, Ms. Davis?
Maybe it was harder. Okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
Use this microphone. Yeah.
So at the I'm Chaley Davis, the high school principal. What we're doing right now at the high school is we do have an anticipated retirement in our secretarial staff, and so we are trying to keep that librarian whole through cutting the hours that we have in the front office. And so as of right now, I do not anticipate a decrease in the library hours.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jennifer Erdodi, 14 Johnson Street. I'd like to go back to the prior question about cutting the bleeding from this district by taking away the part-time teachers' sick days. My first 12 years here, I was awarded sick days along with my full-time colleagues. I work 5 days a week. I work with students. I happen to work with singers who spit a lot. I get sick. My family gets sick. This year, I was told that I would no longer be awarded sick days. That is a hardship on me and my health. It's a hardship on my family. So far this year, I've been lucky. I haven't been sick except for the snow day that we had last one. Spent the day throwing up. I said, thank goodness this was a sick day because I couldn't go to work today. I have no more sick days awarded to me. I'm also lucky that my husband had his cancer 5 years ago when I had sick days. I'm lucky that my mother had her stroke last year when I had my sick days. This is not a bleeding issue. If I'm out a day, the school still has to pay for the substitute to cover my classes. If a full-time teacher is out a day, the school has to still pay for a substitute for their classes. I don't understand how this is saving the school district money by denying teachers sick days. I'm a teacher. I'm 5 days a week in the classroom with our students. And I don't appreciate it being called bleeding, that prior to this, I was treated like a professional and given sick days, and now I'm not.
We'll have no applause except for the recognition of Mr. DeMarco at the beginning, all right? No applause either side. Yes, Superintendent Heisinger.
Sure. Let me refer to the contractual language says all full-time staff, full-time. And all of the years that part-time staff have been allowed to accumulate sick time and then be paid out upon retirement or whenever they leave the district, paid out that sick time has been a significant amount of money. It is a significant amount of money when it accumulates over time, and that time is used. When the contract specifically says full-time versus part-time, and part-time employees have been getting a benefit that was not contractually negotiated, I don't disagree that part-time employees are just as important as full-time employees. However, it should be negotiated through the contractual negotiation process. And it was not passed as part of the new contract. It was a benefit that was being given essentially under the table that was outside of the contract. And that is not being transparent to the taxpayers because that's not the contract that they approved. And so we were simply doing what the board has directed us to do, and that was to manage the contract.
So I'm 48 right now, and that means I can't be out sick at all until I retire in 20 years. Thank you.
My name is Nancy Tong. I live at 150 Federal Hill Road. I'm recently retired from teaching in the Wilton School District, where I have taught full-time, but for years also taught part-time. In my part-time years, I was prorated my sick days. Years that I taught in Lineborough 1 day a week, I got 1/5 of my sick days. That is fair. If the contract is not fair, it needs to be rewritten.
Jen Campbell, 95 Amherst Street. While I appreciate all the conversation about sick days and contracts and whatnot, I think in the effort of making everything transparent, I'd like to know the understanding on why opening up a contract for a superintendent for going from paying a termination of cause without cause from 6 months to 20 months, that would cost the district about $250,000. Why we're not having that conversation as well.
Mr. Carvel.
Well, we're not having that conversation because it is not part of this budget. There is no cost impact to that, and in front of us is warrant Article 1 on the budget. So when you say the cost into this budget, there is zero cost to this budget.
Okay.
Brenda Walker, Route 13 South.
No, come
Sorry.
closer and then say your name for the record,
Brenda
please.
Walker, Route 13 South. Going back to stopping the bleeding, I'm just trying to understand, one of the things that you had said, Jane, was regarding FMLA. What monetary impact did that have on our district?
There could be several impacts of that. Oh, sorry. If you're carrying an employee not eligible for FMLA, you are also paying the district's portion of their health and dental if they carried that. If they're not eligible, you would not be paying that portion of it.
Okay. Regarding the part-time sick days, am I correct in thinking that for as long as the teachers have had a contract, the part-timers have always gotten sick days? Isn't that correct?
I don't know if that's correct, but I know that it has been the practice at least for the last several years. I haven't gone back to
Probably
the
the last
beginning of
20
time.
years, probably. I mean, so
I'll take your
now
word
all
for
of a sudden, the reinterpretation of the contract, now it's being reinterpreted that part-timers no longer get sick days?
We were told to manage to the contract, and that's what we're doing.
So the reinterpretation then, okay.
It's not a
because it-
reinterpretation. It says all full-time employees.
Going back to the library associate at the high school, are you saying that she will no longer be cut to part-time? Is that what
So
Yeah.
I believe Ms. Davis said that there is a retirement in the office, and that was not part of the original budget in there, and because that retirement is happening, she's probably going to present to the superintendent on how to make that same balance money work and keep the library whole. Am I correct in saying that for you?
Okay, I wasn't clarified with that. All right, so what does that mean about the Heron Pond Library Associate? Because if you cut the Heron Pond Library Associate to part-time, that's opening up 10 bus duties a week, and for a minimum savings of around $4,000. So is that something that you also would consider keeping?
So as the board, I would say that when that money comes available, the administration will have a conversation about what impact that does in that retirement if they're not filling that, and I would suspect that the superintendent would take that and propose something to the board for review.
Okay, the two latest cuts to program associates, two full-time program associates have again been cut down to part-time, which frees up approximately $80,000 in health benefits and salary. Is there any consideration to reinstate the speech associate and possibly the other regular ed associates from the middle school who happen to be very long-term employees of the district? Is that something that's going to be considered also? Since we now have the money from the more program associates being cut.
So at this point, all of those changes that happened through this year could still make the administration shuffle for what next year's budget ends up to be. But right now, there's no proposal or any change that we deliberated this at our budget hearing, and the board deliberated the number. And right now, that's the number that we have for the budget, and the reductions are part of that budget. So that's what the board is saying is what we're putting forward on the warrant article. So right now, we are still cutting those positions as presented to this, because that's how we calculated the numbers and that's how the board supports the numbers.
Okay. With that being said, one of the reduced program associates just happened 2 weeks ago. So that reduction of that person's wages would not be in this budget book. So now we're getting another additional, $35,000 from that. So that reduction would not be in the budget book. So that I would think would be able to keep, either a couple other associates or the speech associate, because that number would not be in here because that's a new reduction. So just something to think about.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Ms. Talapa.
In light of that information, I think that we should seriously consider utilizing those new funds for the speech language division, since we recently learned that on the budget next year, we will be 34 hours short per week, from my understanding, of speech language teaching assistants. I'm not sure which particular, and I know that we received an email from that department stating that. So if there are additional funds available, then I think that we really need to address that with those funds.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Ms. Moderator, members of the board, Budget Advisory Committee, taxpayers, voters. My name's Kevin St. Ange, 154 Stable Road here in town. Mr. Carvel, you just answered Mrs. Campbell's question about the midterm contract amendment that was requested by the superintendent to change the termination without cause provision in her contract to increase it from a 6-month payout of about $75,000 to a 20-month payout of about $250,000 plus additional, the cost of additional benefits. And the answer was, that's not part of this year's budget. Here's my question. If it's not part of this year's budget, but that provision in the contract is triggered by a new board that is elected, and let's say there are 2 new board members and the majority of this board changes, and they decide they want to execute that provision on the contract without cause, number one, it's going to cost the taxpayers significantly more, but if it's not funded out of this budget, where is it funded from?
So to answer that, if the board changes over, when the board decides to remove the superintendent on that clause, then that board will have to find the money and answer to it. So that's the board's decision. So that's up to that board to enact that. Though hopefully, like I've said, is that that provision shouldn't be enacted.
So as a follow-up to that question, then, hasn't the majority of this board basically put a target on this superintendent's back to encourage a subsequent board, if it wants to terminate, do so with cause as opposed to without?
So as I would say as the board chairman, the board's responsibility is to evaluate the superintendent within her contract. The board's responsibility is to, if there's deficiencies in the superintendent, then they should put that to writing and give the opportunity by contract for the superintendent to meet the goals.
And the contract requires such a performance evaluation. It was due January 1st of each year of the contract. She's in her second. Has this board even established performance standards, much less conducted the evaluation?
So I can't talk about personnel
The
matters.
answer is that it hasn't. I think that's the answer. Let's
that
be
is
honest
not-
with the
so
first answer.
let me finish answering.
Sure.
The answer is that is not going to be discussed in open public, but this board does establish our evaluation process.
But the evaluation is late, which means
The
the board's not in
evaluation-
compliance with the contract.
The evaluation process and the evaluation, yes, is late.
Okay. Thank you.
None of that. Mr. Lapa.
Yes, an earlier resident had questions about looking back in time and finding historical data to hold people responsible. I believe that we need to look forward and focus on the future. But I just want to state that because personnel issues are handled in non-public sessions, the minutes are typically sealed, which would explain why this board would not have privileged information pertaining to that, the former employees.
All right, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Jen Ball, Shady Lane. I would like to propose a motion that whatever the number is to allow part-time teachers to get their sick days back, that we increase the budget by that specific amount. I'm sure Jane has that exact specific amount. I am one of those teachers who years and years ago, a short time in my career, that used those sick days as a part-time teacher here in Milford. And it was a blessing that this district provided me personally to allow me to be a mother with 2 babies and to allow me to take my daughter to early interventions. I encourage those sick days that Jen or Dodie was talking about, that you, whatever that number is, that the town vote for that back in.
All right, thank you.
Karen Mitchell, Clark Road. Mr. Lapp, are you telling me that because minutes are sealed, no one can ever get to the bottom of how all this occurred with taxpayer money? Is that what you're saying?
Are you talking about the
I'm talking about when we-
contract amendment to the superintendent?
No,
Is
I'm
that what
talking
you're
about when you say we can't look back at data from sealed minutes. Are you telling me nobody has the ability legally to look at those?
I wouldn't know the process, but I'm sure the chairman of the board does.
Well, as you know, sealed minutes of discussions, the body of the sealed minutes are not open for discussion. However, the vote of action that costs taxpayers money, the vote of action is not a sealed item. It is the discussion, and most of the time, boards can unseal minutes when the item is done. So does the board, and the board annually, one time a year, will come together and discuss if they would like to unseal all the minutes and review it annually, review sealed minutes going way past. However, if there's board actions that cost taxpayers money, and we need to find the executive power that institutes that, the board and the board chair, along with the administration, has the authority to go back and look at those to find that action. So that's really the process to that.
Thank you. And I do think that that is something that would be prudent to do at this point, considering all the things that we have heard that have been not being followed appropriately. And I have heard some individual in the audience asking or stating, you know, who was actually on the board that is here right now back when these things took place. I just want to make sure I understand correctly. Mr. Drew, you were, but you don't recall these items being discussed, but were any other board members sitting here today around when these items took place or were voted on or passed? Okay, so I just want to make sure that for the sake of the audience, we know who was and wasn't around at the time of these. And it's concerning, not specifically to you, Mr. Drew, that you don't remember. It's concerning that there doesn't seem to be any recollection from anybody of these being passed. And this is why I say I feel that we should look into these votes and find out who passed these and when and why. Because I think if we add all these things up that we heard Ms. Fortson discuss, and possibly you didn't even list them all, I think this is a large sum of money. And so we sit here and we dicker back and forth over money for important things that seems like this may have taken care of all of it over the years.
All right, thank you. Yes, Mr. St. Ange.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. Two topics. Number one, specifically with the part-time employees, it's my understanding that part-time employees are part of bargaining units here in our school district. If that's the case, and there is a past practice of paying out sick time, whether it's a year, 2, or 3, or has been suggested here tonight, significantly longer, then what this board's action has done is effectively purchased for us, the taxpayers, another liability, because they should be filing an unfair labor practice against the board for denying a past practice that has been in existence for whatever that period of time has been. Whether the unions decide to take that up or not is up to them. But as a taxpayer, my concern is that you've now exposed us to additional liability that we shouldn't be facing. My second point this evening, and I'm no expert on the right to know law, but with respect to the superintendent specifically as an employee, I believe that her employment and personnel matters with respect to the board and the contract and so forth is exempt from the right to know law prescriptions against disclosure. So I think a lot of the hiding that we're trying to do about the facts of what occurred in the meeting with respect to this contract amendment is frankly unnecessary. It may cause this town to slow down in terms of finding out what actually happened, but we know what happened. A majority of this board voted in favor of a midterm contract amendment. What that tells me about Ms. Huizenga's character is one thing. What it tells me about the elected members who voted for that amendment is significantly different. And I think that what you've done is you've made it very clear to us that your interest is in preserving her as the superintendent, not acting in the town or the school students' best interest. Thank you.
That's enough. Mr. Federico. Oh, sorry, yeah.
That's all right. I announced myself. Kevin Federico, 146 Westchester Drive. $43,322,305 is a lot of money. And in the invocation earlier, there was a call for civility and a call for working together. Clearly, after 2 hours of talking about a little over $43 million, we're not going to get that tonight. I hope in the future that the citizens of this community can come together. I hope in the future that we can work things out. There are very controversial topics like libraries and communication centers going on throughout this community right now. And I think that we need to work a little bit harder at being more civil with one another and I would like to call the question, please.
You cannot call the question, no different than last Saturday. I say that, Kevin, in jest, but Ms. Boudreau, there's another person waiting in line. And the reason he cannot call the question is because he was just speaking. Other people can call the question, or he can do it later. Yes, sir. Yeah, well.
Good evening. Mark Bocan from 9 Taylor Drive. I have a question for Dr. Huizinga. I appreciated the presentation you gave us earlier with the slides with lots of bullet items showing percentage increases to explain the increase in the budget for next year. But there was one item that I did not see a percentage stated. And it just caught my attention because it was a potentially very large item. And it called for increased legal services. It was just kind of breezed across that was something that was added this year. So my question to you is, what is the percentage increase in legal services, and what was the reason for it?
Just give me 1 second.
Yep. There were several items that had, specific increases. Legal didn't have a number on it.
It's a $55,000 increase.
$55,000?
$55,000.
Okay. How much of an increase is that from the previous year?
I believe we had budgeted $25,000 in the prior year, and we had gone over that in the past few years. We had gone over that for a variety of different reasons, contract negotiations. This past 10 months, we've significantly gone over our legal budget of $25,000.
Okay, so a little bit more than doubled.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Wood, then coming up.
Yeah, just for clarity, one of the speakers correctly said that the part-time teachers are covered as part of the contract, and that the correct place for those negotiations are in the contract, and then went on to say that, we might be exposing the district. It's important to understand that that was part of negotiations and did not make the contract, and that's why it's being managed that way. So it was brought up in contract negotiations, and it didn't make it in the final agreement. So I just didn't want it to sound like the district is doing something erroneous or doing something kind of off the hip. It was actually a contractual negotiation process.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Mr. Moderator, I would now like to call the question.
All right, you may call the question. There were two other people in line, and my rules say that anyone that's in line, including the two boards that had already indicated an interest, may speak. No. I believe it was Ms. Morgan and Mr. O'Doherty.
Hi, Jamie Morgan, 188 Annan Drive. I hear all this talk about cutting part-time or sick time and all the little ins and outs that you're wanting to hit the budget with, and it's got to be this, and the playground's important, and did they raise 22,000, and then how much do they need? I wish you guys were that careful with legal fees. The November 20th bill was $14,647. Then the bill I got in December was around $8,000 for just Drummond and Woodson. You guys are spending on legal fees things you should be going to the New Hampshire School Board Association for. I don't know why we're having a law firm draft an employee handbook. That doesn't make sense. I would just ask you, if you're so into the details on the budget, then start looking at what you're spending on legal fees and stop going to the lawyer every other day.
My name is Steve Rodoti, 19 Johnson Street. Mr. Wood, you just insinuated that in the negotiations, that's where the part-time thing disappeared?
No, I did not. What I said is that if it's brought up in negotiations, that's the correct venue for it to be negotiated. And if it didn't come out of negotiations, then it's not in the contract.
It had
That's what I
been in the
said.
contract for, as far as I know, since 1995 at least. It's a past practice. It had never been negotiated out, so why would we negotiate something that was there and in practice? You were not a part of that negotiation. So for you to speak on that and how that went down, that might be a little bit inappropriate. I was part of that negotiation. That term never came up because it's a past practice that has always gone through. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion to call a question. It's not debatable. All those in favor of calling the question, raise your card. Anyone opposed? The ayes have it. The question has been called. There are no amendments to the operating budget, and as a result, I instruct the school district clerk to put Article 1, the school district operating budget, on the ballot as originally worded. Now we move on to Article 2. Oop. I thought that was going to change for me. I'll let you handle it. The warrant Article 2 is, shall the school district vote to establish a facilities maintenance expendable trust for the purpose of covering expenditures for necessary facilities repair and to raise and appropriate the sum of $400,000 to be placed in this fund, and further to name the school board as agents to expend from the fund. This sum is to come from general taxation. Mr. Carvel.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, thank you. Mr. Wood will discuss this article.
So Article 2 is to set up an expendable trust fund. One of the things that's come up year after year at deliberative session is the idea of how do we maintain buildings and without bonding. And at the last bond that was passed about 3 or 4 years ago, that got brought up again. What this article does is it sets up an expendable trust fund that dedicates the purpose of that trust to be for facilities maintenance. One of the challenges that happens in the operating budget and has for the last decade and beyond is the encroachment of salaries and benefits in the overall percentage of the budget. And it's just the nature of the beast. Unfortunately, what that means is that we oftentimes head to facility maintenance items and defer those and defer those and defer those. The hope is that by having this expendable trust fund and funding it at $400,000 for this coming year, it will allow us to have money dedicated explicitly for facilities infrastructure improvements that are large ticket items. Some of the things that have been discussed, although there is no exact list, it is something that's going to be discussed by the board at this point, but some of the items that are in need, as many of us know, the heating systems in our schools have had challenges year after year after year. Each one of those buildings is approximately $300,000. So the idea of putting this in an expendable trust fund gives the taxpayer the choice. You also saw last year, with Ms. Forston's revenue projections, one of the challenges is you've got a one-time investment of $1.5 million from the state that we can't count on. If we tried to put this money into the budget, it not only escalates the budget, but it also puts it in the budget in perpetuity. The problem with that is that next year we'd start off $400,000 difference with less revenue. So that's why we're asking for this. And I believe this was by a vote of 5-0 of the board.
All right, thank you. Mr. Wynn.
The Budget Committee approved this by a vote of 5-2 in favor of it. There was no minority statement on this particular warrant.
The Budget Advisory Committee has a majority statement for Article 2 for the Capital Maintenance Expendable Trust. As it's noted that Milford's aging school facilities have recently required emergency repairs due to roof failures, boiler failures, and other facilities failures resulting from long-deferred maintenance of our aged buildings. The creation of this trust provides a less disruptive way to pay for unbudgeted emergency repair needs as they arise. It also allows the district to save gradually for anticipated capital maintenance expenses over time rather than have a large budget increase in a single year to replace high-cost items that are at the end of their service life. This trust can be used only to pay for necessary facility repairs and cannot be diverted to other items, as could be the case if the funds were included in the district's operating budget. Funds in this trust will earn interest. Taxpayers will have the option to add funds to this trust over time, which will potentially reduce or eliminate the need to issue bonds and can save taxpayers money. This trust increases transparency by requiring the school board to hold a public hearing specifying how the funds will be used before any funds will be withdrawn. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah. Mr. Wood, yes.
Actually, after this action, I'm looking for you. After warrant Article 2. Yep.
Okay. There's nothing from the front. Sorry about that. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding warrant Article 2 to establish a facilities maintenance expendable trust? Mr. Takacs.
Steve Takacs. Maybe I just didn't hear right because I am getting old, but didn't I hear somebody just up here just a few minutes ago say something about that there was an encroaching, I think it was you, Mr. Wood, that there was an encroaching, the wages encroach upon necessary other expenditures like facilities and that kind of stuff, and this way we would have a means of paying for the stuff that we need to have done. So isn't this warrant article sort of an end run around the budget process and the taxpayers?
Can I answer that?
Mr. Wood.
Actually, no, I don't see it that way. The encroachment, what I was trying to say is that over the last 10 years, healthcare has increased substantially. Same number of employees, healthcare still has increased substantially. So what happens is in order to keep the budget at a reasonable level and pass the voters, you have to make choices. And so what's happened over the years, year after year, is we make choices and we have things in our facilities that we don't maintain as well as we should. Part of the problem with that is what ends up happening typically in governmental buildings is that we end up letting them dilapidate to the point where we're asking for new buildings. And so what the board's trying to do in my mind, and from my perspective on this article, is to try to set us up so we can maintain our buildings appropriately. We have buildings that are 50, 60 years old with heating systems that if you just, you could probably go through this room and find 100 people that have talked about the heating system in one of our buildings in the last 2 months. So I think what we're trying to do is create an environment where a trust is there. It allows to be refunded if the taxpayer decides to put more money in it next year, they can. It's just like a capital reserve fund, Mr. Takacs, but it's specific for maintenance items.
That's number 2 that I was going to get to, but I'm sorry.
So just like for clarification as well, if we had put, say, for instance, a line item in the budget for new boilers and it didn't pass for some reason, but our boilers failed, we would be in a dire situation. So this is a way to give the board the ability to address those situations as they occur, regardless of what the vote is on the budget.
I understand that, but that's just what I said. You're doing an end run around the. I mean, you're putting this new fund that the taxpayers are now going to pay for at great $400,000. You're talking about the reserve fund, which is, if you came to the town meeting, I was very adamant against that too. But we were talking about $25,000 here and $30,000 here. This is $400,000. That is a lot of money.
So I graduated from this building, and this building is definitely in need of repair. So we are protecting the students by setting up this fund to provide for necessary repairs if and when they happen. It's a proactive approach. It's going to earn interest. And it's basically, we're going to have to pay for it either way. But if we weren't to put it into the budget and then it were to happen, or if we put it into the budget and the new budget didn't pass and we had to go to the default budget, we could be in a dire situation. So our opinion was that this was the most reasonable way to address that situation.
I understand all that, and I appreciate what you're saying. These capital reserve funds, I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars we passed last Saturday for this kind of thing, which raises the tax rate, which is already getting out of control. And now you want to put a $400,000 reserve fund. If you want to replace a boiler, then tell the people that in a warrant article and have us vote on it. If it doesn't pass, you know, that's the way it's been for like a couple hundred years in this town. I'm not going to try to put it down to zero. I'm not going to do that, okay? I just was hoping that anybody that happened to be listening to this thing, they don't vote for it. That's all I'm saying, because, you know, that's going to raise the tax rate a lot. In fact, it's going to raise it more than all the other amendments that we put down at the town meeting to shame, just this one article.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Bastler?
Yes, Ms. Smith.
2 points on that. One is if we did create a warrant article specifically to replace the boilers for $300,000, which is what it would cost to replace them in one building, and the warrant were defeated and the boilers failed, we would not be legally allowed to replace the boilers. No means no is the reason for that. Another point I just wanted to clarify is that the reason this is $400,000 is because we do have boilers that are failing. And in order to replace them, $300,000 gets us boilers for one building. Hopefully, we won't need all of the $400,000 for boilers this year. And some of that money can go to other urgent facilities needs. The idea here was to be more transparent by having an expendable trust where a public hearing would be required before the board could expend any of the funds, and anybody could attend that meeting and voice their opinion about that expenditure.
Thank you. Yes.
That was one of my questions, by the way. Peggy Seward, High Street. I have 2 questions. Do you have a contingency fund? Didn't you used to within your budget? Do you still have one?
Yes, so this year we have a $200,000 contingency fund. So that, and I was going to comment that we did not move that forward next year. We created this instead.
Okay, so that one's removed.
Yes.
So that's always been in 200,000. So it's really up in at 200,000.
It's been in for probably the 3 years now that contingency, if not 4. But yes, we've put that forward every year, and that can be spent in any manner for the board. This one, we've decided that, the board unanimously wanted to focus on our infrastructure. As we all know, there's about $18 million worth of work in all of these buildings. So we wanted to start investing in our infrastructure and our facilities, and the boilers are a real need, as last year, I believe they broke in dire needs, and the backup broke at the same time, and we were in real trouble finding the parts.
My other question is, let's say we have another flood like we had before, and the field at, Vale School is now covered, and the playground is damaged. Can this fund be used for playground, or is it only for buildings?
So I would have to look at the laws and the trust, our lawyers here, but it is facility maintenance. So I think we would probably have to look at her, and she'd probably shake her head.
No?
No?
Oh, that's
So-
too bad. Okay.
All right, there's your answer, thank you. Yes. Mr. Wood, you come in.
Just for clarity on tax impact, so that everybody's clear. So the operating budget, as it's presented, has a negative tax impact of 17 cents. The warrant article for the expendable trust fund would add 12 cents to that. So if the warrant article, if both the operating budget and the warrant article passed, there's actually still a negative impact on the tax rate. And by negative, I mean that it doesn't cost as much. It's going to go down. And so that's something to just be clear on. If all three warrant articles pass tonight, the total tax impact is estimated at about 20 cents, and that's actually a very conservative estimate.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the warrant, and the language there says a tax impact of 25 cents?
So when you look at that particular item, one of the things is that's the increase. So that's the $400,000 increase. That does not take into consideration the revenue. And the tax rate is set based on total cost, subtracting revenue, and then what's left to be raised by taxes. So because it doesn't take into consideration that $1.5 million, that $700,000 revenue, that's why.
Okay, thank you. Oh, do you mind? Thank you.
It was my original statement. Okay, maybe it's just me, but I'm pretty sure that I can say with all honesty that the negative thing that you're coming up with is because of the paying off of the Heron Pond bond, which is $607,000, and you're using this to make up for that. So even with that, you're going to come up with a negative difference. But like somebody once pointed out about 2 hours ago, give the taxpayers a break. Let us have our $600,000 back. You're just using it, you're giving it to us and then taking it back. And I just think that's rotten, period.
All right, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Andrea Chappell, Route 13. I would like to say that in the 12 years my children have been in the district, the schools have actually been shut down due to the heating systems not being able to function in cold weather. And they have also been sectioned off into certain areas of the school where there is heat because there isn't heat in the other buildings. I appreciate this article, that there has been an effort to make a capital reserve of some kind to plan for future expenditures just for these facility repairs and maintenance. And it is so important to keep up with our buildings in this type of a way. And I just want to say that wholeheartedly, I support this 100%. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, Mr. Daniels.
Gary Daniels, Swinton Road. I think Mr. Wood mentioned, I think it was 1.5 million that was received by the state as basically unanticipated, unrestricted revenue. Is that correct?
No, that's... So if you look at the handout that Ms. Forston had spoken about, that is the one-time state aid money in this coming fiscal year. 1.510651 is the number. And so what that ends up with is a net revenue change, an increase in revenue, if you will, of $732,576, which isn't included in that number that you see for whatever, 20 whatever cents. And that's why those two combined would actually drive that impact down. Drives it down to $18.95 per thousand.
Okay, in 2019, the town received $182,000. I suspect that the school district also received something last year. Is that correct?
So in this current year's budget, that was what Ms. Forston was speaking about on the first page. And that is, there's a variety, there's so many moving parts on that one, I can't speak directly. But that's what she went over with increase in kindergarten aid, decrease in this line, and kind of shifting around. And the total revenue change from the previous year was $109,000 roughly.
Okay, my question is, did you use the revenue, whatever that number was from the state, for one-time expenses, or did you put it into operating cost?
It's sitting on the revenue side that will offset all expenditures that are brought forth on the operating budget and the warrants that are approved.
Okay,
It doesn't go one for one. It offsets when you calculate what the tax is going to be for the taxpayers.
Okay, but my understanding is that the board could have used some of that money to buy the 2 boilers, could they not? It just had to be spent before December 31st.
I'm not aware of that, because that's in the 2021 year, and I don't think it's an anticipated revenue. It's not an unanticipated. So as an anticipated revenue, it is listed under your general revenues to offset taxes.
My understanding was in 2019, it was unanticipated. In 2020, it's anticipated. I don't know if it's because our fiscal years are different or whatever, but I was just wondering if that money that was given by the state should be used for one-time expenses, not as operating costs, because eventually you're going to see a drop out of something, and then you're going to have to make it up somehow. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments on warrant Article 2? All right, there are none. So with that, I'll instruct the school district clerk to put warrant Article 2 on the ballot as originally worded. Before we go on to warrant Article 3, I do want to mention that there's still some items available over on the wall. Mr. Al Cox and his crew would definitely like to see that consumed, if not here, certainly at home. So please stop by there and say hello and make a purchase. Yes, Mr. Wood.
Mr. Moderator, I would move to restrict reconsideration on warrant article number 1 and 2.
That's seconded by Mr. Drew. This motion restricts reconsideration of the first 2 warrant articles, so we can't come back to them later. It's not debatable. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration, please raise your card. Thank you. Those who are opposed? The ayes have it. We have restricted reconsideration on Articles 1 and 2. Warrant Article 3 is, shall the Milford School District vote to establish a special education expendable trust fund for the purpose of covering emergency expenditures arising in the area of special education, and to raise and appropriate the sum of $200,000 to be placed in this fund, and further to name the Milford School Board as agents to expend from the fund. Mr. Carvel.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The board recommends this warrant, this trust in a vote of 5-0. This trust is similar to our facilities trust fund, but it is directed to our special education programs. This year, we've had a couple out-of-district placements that have hit our budgets, and the idea of building this trust is to make sure that when we have that happen and these items fluctuate, that we have the money to afford that. The purpose of this is to establish the fund, and then I would say that the theory for us was that the board would put money in from fund balance every year until it got to a comfortable number, and it was left there until it was used, and then we would build it back up again. The idea of this is so that if we do have these mandatory things that cost us money in the special ed, we would not be impacting our regular ed programs in the middle of the year and looking for money to take care of this. So this is like an insurance binder for us, but it also makes sure that we can provide the services necessary in the special ed groups.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Wynn.
The Budget Committee approved this warrant article 7-0, and Mr. Zero had no comment on this.
Thank you for that. Mr. Wilson.
The committee unanimously supports the creation of this special education.
Speak in closer. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. The committee unanimously supports the creation of the Special Education Expendable Trust. As it's noted in recent years, the district has paid significant tuition expenses for students that require out-of-district services. The expenses can be unanticipated, and the district must pay for them in order to comply with the student's individual education plans, as mandated by law. The creation of this trust provides a less disruptive way to pay for unbudgeted special education expenses as they arise. Unlike the contingency fund that voters have approved in previous years for the same amount, $200,000, and which will be used to pay for any expense as determined by the school board, this trust can be used only to pay for special education expenses. The funds in this trust will earn interest, and taxpayers will have the option to add funds to this trust over time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments regarding the warrant Article 3? Yes, sir.
Steve Etek, 5 Georgetown Drive. So just a question for clarity from the board. These funds are going to be used specifically for when our students with special needs have to go to out-of-district facilities. Is that the intent? The reason I'm asking is because I am in favor of doing this, but I'm not in favor of seeing any of this money spent on administrative costs or administrators in special ed. If we're going to do this, I want this to go to the kids. So if just to clarify that, I would appreciate that.
I can tell you that I don't believe this trust was even set up for any administration of it. It is for the kids and for uses of those impacting students.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Steve Takis, in your rebuttal or statement, you were talking about the contingency fund, and you had mentioned the contingency fund before. You said there's $200,000, and was it used this year, or is it still there?
It is still there, but we will more than likely probably have to tap into it. We've had some out-of-district placements that have caused about a $300,000 impact to our budget. So those were unanticipated, and we're working with that and some of our fund balance to probably going to have to use that to correct our budget this year.
Was the $200,000 like a cumulative over the different years, or just the 1 year?
It was a 1 year. It's on the ballot every year for voting. Sometimes we've returned it, sometimes we've used it, and that's how that's gone.
Okay, so you're planning on using it this year?
I think this year, more than likely, we're going to be tapping into it because of those unanticipated expenses.
Okay.
Yes.
How you doing? Steve Martin, Harvest Drive. I just had a question on these trusts in general. I know the town's been doing a lot on their end, and the school's doing it now too. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm just curious, what would happen if one of these trusts, we kept voting money in every year and it got to a very large sum, and we weren't going to use it for its designated avenue? Could the taxpayers vote to change that trust's direction? Like say 10 years from now, we wanted to build a new high school, and the facilities fund had $5 million in it at that point. Could we vote to change the direction of that, or are we locked in for what that trust is specifically designed for?
Again, I'll turn back to our counsel, because that she could probably answer that in some way. I'm sure there's some process she'll tell us.
Yeah, so you can change the process of the trust eventually, but you would have to do it through a warrant article to change it. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. I need your name.
Katie Luva, 390 Mason Road. I was just wondering if it's possible to write into the wording of the warrant article that it's for the student use as opposed to administrative use?
That's a good question. I'll have to ask Ms. Glynn about that, because of there may be specific language that has to be included.
So the language that's in this warrant article is approved by the Department of Revenue and Administration. So I'm loath to change that since it's already been approved. But the special education trusts are only used for student expenses. They never go to administrative overhead type costs. It's only to fund those sort of catastrophic expenses that could sink a school district. So it only goes to those student costs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on warrant Article 3? Yes, come on up. Take your time, no rush.
Bridget Jasper, 15 Power Street. Just a quick question regarding the warrant Article 3 here, because I actually don't know the answer. Who else could be an agent of an article like this? Is it strictly the board?
I believe I'm comfortable. I know the answer, but I'll let Ms. Glynn respond.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you don't name the board as fiscal agents for the fund, the board would have to ask to use the money at your meeting every year. So naming the board as fiscal agents allows them to use the fund over the course of the year, and after a public hearing. They still have to have a public hearing and explain what they're intending to use it for. But I'm not aware that any other individual could be named as an agent of the fund. I think it's just the board.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? No, there are none. And so with that, I'll instruct the school district clerk to place warrant Article 3 on the ballot as originally worded. And that is that. There being no other business that can come before the board tonight, I declare the meeting dismissed.